Heavy is the green, extra heavy is blue, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's in reference to what we have. I know I've got a sheet here that has, the elongation factor, but that's more towards like the TheraBand, which is kind of the flat, broad band that's more used in the physical therapy settings. And just understanding there is that, the color differentiation of what we use versus the elongation factor for that would be similar. So the elongation meaning how much you pull it apart. So right now, this is its normal length of a band. So then for the elongation, how much effort you're using to pull apart, that's kind of the effort and amount of weight or pounds applied to do a full elongation of it. All right, so that's kind of what this is talking about here, is this elongation component. So what it's talking about is that as far as the yellow, when you're going to 25% elongation, 50%, 75, 100, 125, all the way up to 250% elongation. So like I said, right now this is 0 as far as elongation, because you're not applying any resistance to this. Now when you start to apply resistance for this yellow one, and then think about how much weight that is to apply for the elongation component. So you have to kind of do your best guesstimate there as far as the effort and the amount of how much longer it is right now, okay? So like I said, nothing. And then when you do elongate it, so right there, so if I were to bring it up to 50% elongation, according to that chart, that would be roughly about 1.8 pounds effort. But that's with the flat one, so with this one's actually be a little bit more effort to go into that 50 to 100% elongation. Does that make sense? So that way I always get when people are asking how much weight would this be comparable to in lifting if I'm using the bands. And that's why I wanted to make sure I put that in there to kind of help better understand what you're doing.
Could you demonstrate 250% elongation?
Have you hold this for me, please? So right here is nothing. Hold on to it tight. As far out as you can go. Does that make sense there? So usually when you're doing that 250% elongation, this end has to be attached to something or somebody holding it stable so you can go through and do some of that effort. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So with this one, it's easy. If I was to use the other one, it'd be pulling her with me.
So when you're doing like the 250 elongation, is that more like a major muscle group
Yes.
that you would be working on?
Yes, you're not
Okay.
doing a minor muscle group at all.
Right, okay.
So you'd be doing like a bigger lift, like a chest press,
Right,
in which my
okay.
back would be to her pushing forward,
Uh-huh.
or as I was kind of doing like a side movement or a row.
Okay.
All right, you're not going to do it with the leg, having it attached to the leg, because then that's going to be unstable for the knee.
Mhm.
And as you're doing that, unless you've got extremely strong joints, it's going to destroy the knee. All right, so again, based upon the elongation, it's also dependent upon the thickness of the band and the beginning tension of the band. So the more the band gets used, that beginning tension is less versus less that it's used, that beginning tension is more. Does that make sense? So it's kind of think about like a rubber band. When you constantly stretch that rubber band out and you're done stretching out like after 50, 60 times, it's a little bit longer at rest than if it was a brand new rubber band. So same concept with the bands. One of the things that we like about doing the bands is they're portable. They travel well, so you can just kind of fold them up, put them in your bag, and if you're traveling, going to different hotel rooms, stuff like that, you can do them in your hotel room. And the other thing too is you can do them at home if you have a space-conscious environment at home. A lot of people don't always have big giant homes or big giant rooms to have full-on workout equipment in. These are great alternative to keep in a room. You can just put them in a box, either put them under the bed or put them in a closet. All right, they're adaptable. You can do the whole body exercise with these, and I've got different exercises near the end. I'll go over that with you as well. Variety of different exercises can be done based upon what your abilities are. So you can do them based upon if you're just beginning, someone who's a novice, or advanced lifter can still incorporate bands into their routine. So it's not just for therapeutic purposes, broad spectrum for it. They're cost effective, and then change up your workout routine. So one of the things that I always tell people to do when they're doing some of this stuff, so an example would be kind of doing a bicep curl, both arms, so just make sure that this goes underneath the arch of your feet, elbows kind of at your hips, and then the hands, palms upward, keep the elbows at your side, keep that movement slow. So that way as you're keeping that movement slow, it changes it up, and so you get more of that eccentric, concentric control, instead of being a quick movement here. So 2 different ways of doing the bicep curl. It's just when you're doing a quick versus a slow movement. So a slow movement, you're going to do less, versus a quick movement, you're going to do a little bit more, because it takes a moment for the muscle to respond. All right, because of the stimuli that's being sent to it. All right, so some of the things that we'll go over: squats, hip, leg and hip extension, leg and hip flexion. So what you understand is, when you're doing hip flexion, it's bringing the leg forward this way. We're not doing anything with the knee. It's coming from the hip. Hip extension, bringing it back. Whereas leg flexion, leg extension. So you can go into hip flexion, leg flexion, or leg extension by keeping the hip flexed as well. So that's one thing to keep in mind is hip or leg flexion, hip or leg extension, hip adduction, abduction, in and out of the body. So adduction, adding to the body, abduction, taking away from the body. All right, and then a deadlift with it. So that's all for lower body. And we'll kind of go over some of that stuff here in a moment. So squats, and I did put down, and I tried to make sure that it was legible for you guys to read on the sheet, so I just started to do like 2 slides per page. So for the squat, what you're going to be doing, there's 2 ways of doing this. One way is keeping it at the hips. The second way, up at the shoulders, depending upon the resistance of the band and how wide of a stance you need to have. The reason why I say that, everybody is going to have a different form for the squat, based upon your ability. So I'm not going to ask that you go into full-on movement. You're going to stay within what your ability is. And before people start to kind of get into any information here, we will have modifications of a squat for people that have had knee and hip replacements. So even if you've had a knee and hip replacement, we find a way to make this work for you. So before you come and tell me you can't do it, just understand, we have 84-year-old women missing part of her heel and has both knees replaced, still doing a squat variant. So I want to give that out to you right now before I get feedback saying you can't do it. All right? So getting that proper form down, coming down into that squat movement, coming back up. So all you're doing, just staying within your ability. So if you have issues with your knees and hips, you're only going to be doing here, or keeping the weight here so that it's less resistance versus more resistance up here throughout the whole movement. So less resistance here, coming down, coming up. So again, staying within what you are able to do. Does that make sense? Any questions on the squat movement? All right, so the leg extension with a band. So one of the things that we always tell people to do is make sure this is attached to a sturdy end. Another way of doing the leg extension with the band is kind of wrapping it around your foot in front of you. Having something beside you, so that way you're tightening it, extending that leg out. All right, so that way you have that resistance to go in to the leg extension. That's not hip extension, that's leg extension. So that way you're activating the quadricep muscle. Does that make sense there? The other thing you can do is tighten up on this, placing your foot through the loop. This one doesn't want to work that way. Tightening up, and then making sure you've got your balance. If need be, hold on. And then leg extension in this manner as well. Does that make sense there? So then to go into hip abduction, taking away from the body, not adding to the body, coming off to the side this way. So that way you're activating the outer part of the hip here. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay? Switching that up would be having this attached to an object over here and have the resistance coming in to add to the body. Okay? So same movement, but instead you have the resistance while you're pulling into the body.
And you want to take it past the center line?
Yep, past that center line, absolutely. Okay? Now, so that's just going into the leg extension. For hip flexion, okay, so like I talked to you earlier, the difference between leg extension, hip flexion. So like for hip flexion, what you're gonna do, again, same concept here, keeping it around your foot. And sometimes what you can do too is place it around your ankle if need be. So now, keeping the leg somewhat straight, so that way the movement, it should be coming from the hip, not the knee this time. Coming forward here. Okay? So that way it's coming forward, you're not engaging the knee, you're engaging the hip. So that way you bring it forward, hip flexion, bring it back, hip extension. Does that make sense? So I just kind of explained the hip flexion there. So standing hip extension, again, just kind of went over that briefly. Placing it underneath the foot if necessary, if you have the balance, coming back. Otherwise, the other option is having this anchored underneath the door that closes into you, or have someone holding onto it. I don't always suggest wrapping it around furniture, because furniture can move. So have it anchored into something. All right? So then when you're doing the knee or leg, okay, so stay in the same position as that hip extension to go into knee flexion. All right, so we did knee extension, now we're doing knee flexion to work the hamstrings. So we already worked the quadriceps, now we gotta work the hamstrings. Bending the leg, coming back up. Okay, so that way you're engaging the hamstring muscle here. And bringing that leg up as much as you can with the amount of resistance you're allowed. Does that make sense? Okay, any questions on some of the stuff so far? I know it's kind of,
When you have bad knees or anything like that, and you're doing the squats, when you're doing it to what you are able to, it makes your knees stronger, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
yes. And for you, what I would suggest, especially when you have poor knees, making sure that the feet turn out a bit. So what that's going to do helps open up the hips and allows the knees to track properly, especially in women. We find, because if we try to keep the legs straight, our knees have a tendency to want to come out anyway. Turn those toes out just a little bit, hips back, and practice by sitting and standing first before you even go to doing the band. So just sit down on a chair, stand back up. So that way you know where the hips have to be at, and the chair is there to support you, just in case you need that. But it's always something, always stay within what your ability is. So just because you may have bad knees, doesn't mean I'm going to say don't do it. Right? I'm going to say let's stay within what you can do. I'm not going to expect you to come all the way down here. That's just not going to happen. That's not realistic.
Right.
What is realistic? Sitting down, standing up. So when I hear people say, well, I can't do that. Well, what are you doing right now? So,
Okay.
you know, and it's stuff like that that helps with your everyday activities as well. Going up and down stairs, sitting down, standing back up again, things like that.
Okay.
Okay? Yep. So it's stuff that we can definitely go over with you when you're ready to start all that.
All right.
Getting all tangled up here. There we go. All right, now, so instead of doing the little bands, I'm going to show you with this one first as far as doing like the lateral steps. Because that's what this is kind of doing, is kind of doing like a lateral movement. So you're doing kind of the hip, add abduction, taking it away from the body here, bring it back in. Away, bring it back in. So that way you're getting both. So this is a great one to do, especially when you do have knee issues.
I was gonna say, when I had my knee replaced, doing this band sideways like that by the end of doing like 3 sets of it, I was exhausted.
Uh-huh,
And you can feel it.
you do, because what we're
in your
doing
hips
is,
and-
yeah, exactly, we're engaging
Yeah.
the medial aspect of the hips, all right? Or the lateral aspect of the hips, excuse me. And then a little bit of the medial by doing the internal. All right, so when you take that step out, stepping in, keeping yourself into that partial squat position, making sure we're not turning the toes out as you take that step. Because that's one thing a lot of people try to do, is as they step out, they try to turn the toes out. You're now taking that out of the equation, taking the lateral part of the hip out. Whole point is to work on this. So now, not only that, but then you're also engaging the lateral aspect of the quadricep here and the lateral aspect of the hamstring that comes across part of the knee, and it's the knee stabilizer. So, and that's why we have people doing that, because that way it helps stabilize. So we'll have people like you who's had a hip replaced, knee replacements, athletes, to prevent or reduce the risk of ACL injuries, because they're always in a pivot point coming around. Well, if we can keep them strong here and then they can pivot, that knee is more stable. All right, so now, same component here is doing what I kind of did. That's why I did like the lateral steps here. So that you're seeing side-to-side movement. So the right side applying the resistance this way, left side fighting that resistance, slowing it down coming in. So that way you're getting a abduction, adduction at the same time with doing this. Otherwise, it's these little guys. All right, doesn't look like much, especially with how small it is. But when you start putting this in place, it's a good amount of resistance. So what have you guys do?
Looks painful.
It is, I say.
It's a torture. It is a torture device. But you know what? You get people to start to listen real quick. All right, deadlift. Another one that a lot of people always say is controversial. All right, part of it is old school way of always doing a deadlift, straight legs, coming down RDL. Our way of teaching a deadlift, knees are bent, hips are back, back is supported, so that way you are strengthening that lower back. All right, especially for people that sit every single day, we got to work on strengthening that lower back. And it helps so much more with posture, standing up tall. All right? So one of the things that you can do when you're doing that deadlift, again, staying within your abilities, your range of motion. That's why I like doing the bands, because that way you're not doing too much. Get yourself down, so right at the knees, bring yourself right back up, so then when you're up, you extend the knees. Bring yourself back down like you're trying to pick something up. Keep those shoulders back, chest up, back straight. Coming back up. Does that make sense? So as you're doing this, when you start to pick up weight up, you pick that weight up, keeping it close to you. We're not everywhere with the weight. I'm getting tangled up in this.
You are.
Okay, any questions with that part of the deadlift movement? Comments, concerns for that? So again, same thing, what I try to cover with the squat. Next one is the upper body exercises. So here we cover the chest press, overhead press, the row, upright row, lat pull down, front side raise, pull aparts, bicep, tricep. So when we do the chest press, that band is going to stay right behind you, underneath the arms. Am I making it difficult for you, Pete?
No.
So this is going to kind of come over here, choking up on the band, pressing forward. So as you're doing that movement, pressing that weight or pressing the resistance forward, and you have that some resistance coming backward as well. Okay? So that's for the chest press movement. Next one is doing shoulder press. So if you're not able to do both hands together, keeping a staggered stance here. So as you're doing this, keep that stance staggered. The back heel is on the band, arms up, pressing upward. So that way you're going into that shoulder press movement here. Okay? Otherwise, if this is too difficult, loosen up on one side, one arm at a time, just like that. Does that make sense? So you can do both arms or one arm, depending upon the resistance you have.
How sturdy are those bands?
These ones are actually fairly sturdy.
Okay.
We're gonna have people wrapping these ones around equipment. And reason why, and actually what I'll do, I'll pass the red one around so you guys can kind of get a feel for that. It has a cloth around it, elastic cloth around it. So that way if the band snaps, it stays confined in here. It does not step back. The other thing too, with the plastic handle, the cloth, a little bit of latex here. People have a latex allergy, can avoid touching this. And touch this part only, or this part. So that's the other reason there. So that way you're able to kind of do a couple different things there.
And are those, you can buy those for home use, correct?
Variant quality of it, yes.
Okay.
Who makes that one?
That was performbetter.com, that's what we go through for, that we have, and they are actually one of the higher end ones up there with like the spray brand, stuff like that. We prefer doing this type of a band from the standpoint that durability factor. It'll last much longer than if we did a band that was not quite like that durable. When you're just doing just a regular tube with just a latex tube,
Yeah.
you wrap around stuff, it gets chewed up.
Do they use the wider bands of physical therapy just for stability?
No, it's more of a cheapness factor,
Oh,
not necessarily
okay.
cheapness factor, but it's easy because you can cut it up.
Right, yeah, I've seen them pull, like,
Yeah.
cut it, tie.
Yeah, and it comes in a big roll.
Okay.
So they can cut what they need, have what they need for each person. So that way they're not
Right.
constantly going through finding exactly this. That way they just put it with the chart and
Right.
it just kind of
Okay.
goes up that way. So that way each person has their own and it's set just for that individual.
Aren't
That's
they
why.
even named like TheraBand or something like that?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And it's a box. It usually comes in a box. And it's a roll and then they just cut out, yeah. And just cut what they need and they have different size variants of it.
Right.
But for something like that, it's kind of like about that thick. But it's, yeah. All right, so for the road, this is where, you help me with this one, Lena. So what you can do, you can just stay there. So for the row, you want that anchored or have someone holding onto it. And you're gonna pull back towards you. And as you're doing that, you're pulling it back, so you're trying to create as much resistance as you can and sitting back a little bit for stability. Because that way when you're up right here, it's easy for you to kind of come back and forth. Here, makes it harder to come back and forth, plus you're engaging your core this way. Oh my God, thank you. All right, any questions for the row component?
Are there any rules as to, recommendations as to how far back you should pull your arms?
Well, you want to bring the arms back, what each person is able to do, ideally, you want to bring them back, so that way the shoulders come back completely, and you're able to bring the shoulder blades to retract the shoulder blades together. So what we always tell people is retract the shoulder blades, so that way if you could stick a pencil, you can hold the pencil between shoulder blades. So the elbow should come back, the hand should come back towards about the rib cage if you're able to. That way you're getting a full contraction of the rhomboids, of the trapezius, and the upper part of the lats. All right, so the next ones that you can do are the bent over row. So there's two ways of doing this one. Again, kind of getting yourself so that way you're standing over the band, kind of like when you're in that squat, slightly wider. One way is having it crossed over. The reason why I suggest crossing it over, especially if it's a longer band, it kind of applies a little bit more resistance, bringing it up. So as you're doing that, shoulders back like you're in that squat or deadlift position, back straight, bringing it back up towards you. So as you're doing that, bringing it towards the rib cage. All right, so not up towards the shoulders, bringing it towards the rib cage. Upright row, I don't always suggest this one unless you've got the flexibility in the shoulders. The reason why I say that is when you bring that up, the bands up for the upright row, you're bringing those elbows up. So I prefer more the bent over row for most people, because that way you're not compromising the shoulder.
Are they working the same muscles?
Similar, very similar. It's just the upright row is one that we do as a transition, especially for our athletes. People going into doing kind of powerlifting routines, because then it gets that movement pattern of getting shoulders up, and especially some of our overhead athletes, because when they're throwing here, they need something that's the opposite of that to bring it up this way instead. So it's kind of more specific versus general. Whereas the bent over row is more for a general population. All right, lat pull down. This one, everyone always says is a difficult one to try to do with bands. Here's a way of engaging the latissimus dorsi muscle, which is kind of one of the biggest muscles of your back. So it goes right underneath the shoulder blades, comes across the back part. All right, so you have the trapezius that starts up near the neck and comes down. Lats are below that and comes down. So with this one, start with the arms up over the head, extending it down towards the chest here, so that way you're getting the lat muscle involved. All right, so that way, kind of as if you're doing a lat pull down here, single arm lat pull down or using a bar for the lat pull down movement, that's what this does. So it simulates that movement with the band. All right, front raise, side raise. Especially people who struggle doing overhead movements. So what you're going to do, have some resistance, choke up a little bit if need be, but you want to be able to get the arm up, doing the single arm, up towards shoulder height for front, off to the side for side raise. So you're doing a similar movement as if you're doing, engaging the muscles as if you're doing an overhead press, but you're not creating that impingement within the shoulder. So this is one for people who are just coming back from shoulder issues to work on strengthening the shoulder. It also gets the elbows and the forearm involved as well. Any questions on some of those so far? All right, one of the ones that Joel and I always go to with everybody, especially if you're at a desk. Posture is one thing that we're always talking about. Band pull apart. The reason why we say this one is you're going through and doing this movement, you're engaging posterior upper back. Keeps your shoulders back. The reason why posture is so important is when we slouch over like this, it's putting pressure on the heart, the lungs, the internal organs. So they're not working as effectively when we're constantly in this movement here. Bring yourself upright, all those organs can function better, and you can get a deeper breath in there. All right, so what I'll have each of you do, go through and try the band pull apart, but I'm going to have you try it with the yellow one. The red one's going to be a little more resistance. So as you're doing that, so keep the arms out in front. Pulling apart this, there you go.
Yeah, you can feel that.
So this is, if you're going to do anything, this is one I would suggest everybody do at their desk on a regular basis. Because then we're always sitting like this in our desk, doing this in the computer and stuff like that. Uh-huh.
Office bands.
Yeah,
Feel
absolutely.
crew for office bands.
Yeah, look into that.
You need a lead singer for the band?
See, I'm trying to help you guys here. And
Yeah.
especially with having Lena here, it helps even more because,
Well, she wants the offices to compete a little bit.
Yeah.
well, I'm giving everybody ideas on what they can do. Joel and I, that's our job, is to give people clues and ideas. And give people on the right path.
That's a great idea.
It is. It is. So I kind of showed you some of the lateral steps already, stepping sideways. Core work with the band. I'm not going to get that on the floor. So I put pictures up instead. So one of them is the far right corner is a bridge. So it is hard. So what you do, the band basically goes all around the hip and you bring yourself up. So what you do when you're doing a bridge, that's engaging more of the glutes and the hamstrings of the body. All right, and then from down below, right down below her, of that one is doing the bicycle, modified bicycle with the bands. So again, using the small band that you have right there, Lena, on your desk, that would go around the feet and you pull up, like kind of in a pushing motion on your back.
On that bridge, does she have it wrapped around her torso too, or is
It's
it?
just wrapped around the hip and her hand.
Oh, just
So,
have in the hands?
yeah, so if you're doing one of these, I think it's what you're looking at is kind of a design of her shirt.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So this way it kind of comes around. And then the other way of doing the bridge is having the band wrapped around above the knees. So you're in that same bridge movement, but it's above the knees, so it's around your thighs. And you bring your legs up into that bridge again and try and keep the legs steady. So that with the band around it, it's going to want to bring the band legs in. So now you're getting inner outer thigh plus the posterior part of the thigh when you're doing that.
Does
And
that
the lower
feel,
back.
does that feel the same as when you put like a block in yoga or a ball in between your
Yes.
thighs and then squeeze?
Yeah, squeezing, you're getting more of the internal.
Oh,
So when you're pulling apart, you get more of the external.
okay.
So both are beneficial there. It's just, you know, and I like that idea of doing that internal there because a lot of women are always weak on the inner thigh versus the outer thigh. It's just when you want to make sure you get both, equal emphasis on both. And then doing some of the core work there, one of the other things that you can do with this, placing the band, so when you get on in a quadruped, so you're on your hands and knees, having a band here, so then when you get yourself down, like you're going down into a push-up, so as you're coming back up and down, the object is when you're going into that push-up, the elbows come out of it in your push-up position. So when you're here, in that push-up here, so when you're coming down, that band's gonna come out. So you're resisting that resistance outward. At the same time, you're bringing yourself up and down. Does that make sense there? So that's one of the things that you can do there as far as modification of a push-up there. All right, so that's just some ideas of stuff that can be done with the bands.
Then in the lower left-hand picture where she's doing the push-up first with the band on her forearms.
Forearm, yep.
Yeah, like really close. And
Yeah,
then she
so
moved
that's
it
more the
out.
tricep. That's more the
Okay.
tricep. When it's close in, you get more of the tricep. When you're out, you're engaging more of the shoulder and pectoral. So it's just kind of shifting the weight in or out. That's why. All right, so core work with the bands, and when you're doing rotation work. So you see some people doing rotation with a ball or with the cable. Same concept. Have the band attached to something, and you're rotating outward. Does that make sense? So then you're rotating away from resistance. You don't necessarily go in, because then when you go in, there's no resistance. All right, I already kind of showed you some of the lateral movement there, lateral steps there already. And then some of the other things you can do with the bands is changing the tempo. I kind of went over that at the beginning on how you can go either slow or fast. Incorporate it into eccentric training. So what that means then, so if you're doing a squat movement, slow that movement downward. So when you're coming down, hold, and slowly come up. That way you're getting both concentric, eccentric movements. So concentric where you have to concentrate. Eccentric is kind of that opposing of that. So in the squat movement, so coming down is the easy part. It's coming up is the hard part. So slowly come down to make it harder. That's where you get into that eccentric movement pattern there. Does that make sense there for the eccentric control? So everything can do eccentric, concentric movement. It's just where is the effort applied? And then it's the opposite of that you slow it down. All right, so great for mixing up in weights, in between sets, for active rest periods. The other thing that we'll see for the advanced lifters, and a couple of you probably have seen this with some of our other lifters in the past, is they'll have the band around the bar, and then that wrapped around the safety. So when they come down or coming up, it increases the amount of weight they're lifting. Because when you're doing this with the bar or with the weights, so when you're doing a dumbbell curl here, and you're doing it with the weight, the actual part of resistance that you feel is actually past the 90 coming up here. This is where the resistance is at with a dumbbell. Not so much down here, because you have gravity. All right, now when you incorporate the band with that, you have resistance the whole way when you're doing that. So that's where it comes in when you're doing the squat or the deadlift or the bench press with that. So that way you have resistance the whole way, so it increases their training load without increasing the weight. All right, any questions on any of this? I know I kind of went over that half hour, but some great questions in there.
That's good.
And anything else?
How many reps or times do you do it and how often?
Well, that again is up to the individual and what their training level is. For someone that's just beginning, I would say go through one set of 8 to 10 reps the first time. Wait a day, the next day, after a rest day, the third day. So you have the first day, second day's rest, third day of doing another round. How do you feel? If you still feel great, add a second set of 10. And then go from there. But I wouldn't do any more than that right away. Build up to doing 3 sets. So that could take a couple of weeks to build up to doing 3 sets of 10. Once you're able to do 3 sets of 10, no problem, increase the resistance on the band. Okay? So that way you're not doing too much too soon. And then when you're able to start doing more and more, change it up again. So that you're doing upper body one day, lower body another day. Kind of making changes there. All right, anything else? Any other comments, concerns? All right, we're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you.